Evening wanderers, welcome back to Lantern and Shadow. The library opens at midnight. Some doors only appear when you're finally ready to walk through them. Tonight, one opens to a library that writes you a book with your name on the spine. Now let's rewind, shall we? The story begins the way good nights do, with a door you didn't expect to find and the soft certainty that wherever it leads, you're safe. There's a hush to it, like a father tucking a blanket to your chin and saying, "Sleep now, I've got the rest." Outside, the city keeps its small electrical chatter. Inside, the air smells of rain and old paper. And the shelves, yes, the shelves, breathe as if some patient animal was sleeping there, slow and content. At midnight, the library writes. At midnight, a book appears with your name on the spine. I found the place the night the streets were wet enough to mirror the lamps. It was wedged between two buildings that had never left room for anything. And yet there it was, a narrow door, a wooden sign carved with a steady hand. The library that dreamed of you. And the faintest ribbon of lamplight trying not to spill into the dark. No bell rang when I stepped in. If there had been, it would have been ashamed to interrupt. The only sounds were the whisper of pages turning themselves and the small, welcoming shiver of a wick catching flame. The desk at the far end held a lamp and a ledger and a sleeping cat that didn't quite manage to pretend. Behind the desk sat an elderly librarian with white hair gathered like fog and eyes with the unhurried brightness of someone who has made peace with many endings and found, still, more beginnings. "You're just in time," she said, as if this meeting had been penciled into the margins of the night. "Midnight books appear for those who still remember what they once wanted." The cat opened one eye as if to second this, then closed it again. I stood there, letting the quiet take my pulse, feeling a small room become larger by the simple trick of paying attention. On some shelves, the leatherbacks rose and fell, 100 sleeping lungs. On a long table nearby, new volumes rested with their titles glowing faintly, blue as veins beneath skin. "Come," the librarian said, leaving her chair. "Yours is warm. They're always warm when they first arrive." We walked the aisle together, the way a parent walks beside you when you're small, close but not crowding. The spines hummed with unvoiced chapters. The long table waited. And there it was, a plain-bound book whose title held my name like a hand holds a stone. It's kept for years, absent-minded but sure. "This one," she said, and her voice did the thing that good voices do at bedtime. It softened the room and arranged the pillows. "This shows the life you might have lived if you had followed your dream." I let my fingers rest on the cover. The leather was warm, as promised. A breath, and I opened it. Sawdust and sunlight rose, as if the book had its own weather. I was 10 again, the summer hot on my shoulders, a plank across 2 sawhorses, and a set of borrowed tools that felt sacred because they were borrowed. My grandfather's hands were brown and enormous. He held the wood steady while I measured, tongue between teeth, as if precision were a prayer and the line I drew could hold the world in place. I turned the page. I was older now, in a room that smelled like fresh-cut pine and rain dried on a jacket. Drawings pinned to the walls made a city no one had built yet. I spoke to clients whose eyes softened when they saw where their children would put their backpacks down. I learned the patience of beams, how weight travels through a house like a story, down the roof rafters, through the studs, into the foundation, into the earth, and back to the beginning again. I turned the page. Love arrived like a well-made door. It fit and swung easily. We argued about paint the way kind people argue, knowing the argument is a form of trust. We ate late on the floor of a place not yet finished and called it finished for that night because the moon made a silver table of the plywood. Our friends came by with laughter and casseroles in dishes they'd never get back. When the first real winter pressed its slow palm to the windows, the house held. We held too, not because there were no storms, but because we learned how to brace for them, how to let one another lean. I turned the page. Work became what work becomes when you do it long enough. Less spectacle, more service. I watched a child's height, pencil rise on a pantry doorframe. I came back 3 years later to add another mark, and the mother didn't cry until she saw the date beside the first one. I fixed a porch after a hurricane and found a wallet in the crawl space that had lain there since someone else's summer. I met a crew of men and women who could read a blueprint at a glance and crack a joke without looking up from the nail they were setting. We lost a friend to illness and built a ramp at his old place because grief, too, should find an easy way in. None of it was perfect. There were mistakes that cost money and mistakes that cost apologies. There were weeks we counted coins and days we considered letting the dream thin to a thread and slip from our hands. But there were also dinners where the food was astonishing for no reason, and mornings when the light through sawdust looked like 1,000 small stars. The life inside the pages was not a fantasy, it was simply full, and it would have been mine if I had chosen differently. I did not notice the librarian return to my side, but there she was, quiet as the turning of a page. "You may read as long as you wish," she whispered. "But every story asks to be finished." I kept reading until the words warmed my fingertips and the picture in front of me brightened the room around me. I stayed with that other self long enough to know the feel of his exhaustion and the beautiful ache of his satisfaction. I watched him run a thumb over the edge of a beam he had planed until it shone. I watched him fall asleep on the sofa and wake with sawdust in his eyelashes, and I loved him with the uncomplicated love we reserve for people who are doing their best. At the final page, there was no grand flourish, just a question set in type that respected silence. Would you trade what is for what might have been? I closed the book, and the scent of sawdust thinned until it was only the rain again. I looked at the librarian's face. It held no argument, only the willingness to stand on the shore while I decided which way the boat should face. Outside the library, my life waited, imperfect and luminous in its imperfections. The people I would go home to were not lines on a page. They were beating hearts and unwashed mugs and a text waiting for a reply. They were the soft apology I needed to make and the joke I had been saving. The work I would do tomorrow was not the dream I'd once had, but it had its own architecture, a span of hours built to carry others, a small room held inside a larger room we call the day. "No," I said, the word gentle in my mouth. "I wouldn't trade, but I'm glad to know he exists." The librarian's smile was the sort that never makes you feel foolish for choosing what you already love. "He's glad you do too," she said. Then, after a heartbeat, "You're allowed to borrow the best of each other." "How do you mean?" She touched the book with one finger, and the gold of my name cooled to a tender glow. Let him remind you of tools you can still pick up. Patience, sometimes. Making something with your hands when you've been too long in your head, measuring twice, cutting once when a day feels wasteful. You can bring those back with you. The library gives you the grammar, you decide the sentences. We stood there a while as if we had all the clocks. The cat moved from one nap to another, a little stretch in between. From the high shelves came a sound like distant rain. The midnight books were finishing themselves and the room was pleased. "Will he be all right?" I asked, meaning the version of me who went on building houses, who grew old in a place he had made, and drank coffee on a porch he had hung himself. The librarian regarded me with the patience people often forget to have for themselves. "He will be all right the way you will be all right," she said. "Not because nothing will go wrong, but because he will keep writing. And when he forgets how, someone will hand him a page. That's how it works with us. We pass the blank to the one who needs it." I let the words settle. Outside, the rain had gentled to a mist that made a kingdom of streetlight. Inside, the long table of books was growing dimmer. The hour was closing like a well-made door. "Before you go," the librarian said, tapping the ledger, "we ask for nothing you'd miss, but we offer a small parting gift." She reached beneath the desk and produced a narrow envelope sealed with red wax. It weighed almost nothing, like a promise or a sigh. I slipped it into my pocket without opening it. Some gifts are meant to be carried a while before they speak. The cat escorted me to the door as if I might get lost in 5 paces. When the night took me back, the city had changed only in the way a sleeping face changes, a softening you notice because you're close enough to care. The door of the library closed, and I thought for a second I saw letters moving in the carved sign, as if the name itself were breathing. By the time I turned around to look again, the door was brick, plain and shy, as if it had never met me. Dawn was rehearsing at the edge of the sky, practicing its first lines in pale blue. I walked home through streets washed clean, my steps the quiet kind you don't count because their number doesn't matter. At my building's steps, I sat for a moment and remembered the way the grain of the wood lifted under a planer, small curls falling like the peel of an apple and landing at your feet. Only then did I open the envelope. It was a single page, thick as old stationery and warm as a palm. The words on it were still glowing, as if the ink wanted to be helpful. They were simple enough to live inside. "You're still writing." That was all. And it was enough because it reminded me that a life is not a verdict handed down, it's a draft carried forward. I put the page in my wallet where old things I love go to be near me. A photo with a thumbprint in one corner, a note with a grocery list on one side, and a heart on the other. I touched the edge of it when the elevator was slow, and when the kettle took its time, and when the day tipped a little and tried to spill. I slept for an hour when I got in. It was the kind of sleep that keeps one ear open. When I woke, the light had climbed the wall to a familiar place, and the room, I know, mess and plant, chair and mug, felt slightly rewritten, not because it was different, but because I was. I made coffee and noticed the way steam knows how to dance. I answered the waiting text with words that meant what they said. Later, with no one watching, I took down the small hammer I own for picture hooks and tightened the hinge of a cabinet that had been complaining for a week. The door sighed and fell into place like a shoulder returning to a socket. "Good," I told it, as if it were a skittish animal. "You're all right." That afternoon, I did my ordinary work. I carried over a few of his habits from the book as if they were polished stones in my pocket. I measured twice, not lumber now, but a sentence, a promise, a plan. I cut once, not with a saw, but with a yes that didn't hide, a maybe beneath it. I held something steady so someone else's hands could be sure. When a mistake appeared, I sanded it gently, instead of pretending it wasn't there. Evening came on, honest and golden, and the city shrugged into its evening voice. I believed then, for the first time in a long time, that both of us, the me I am and the me I might have been, were walking parallel streets and nodding when we passed each other in the mind's long window. I can't tell you when the page stopped glowing. I only know that the words stayed visible in the way good advice does. They refused to get fancy, so they lasted. And if I listen now when the night is kind and I've put away the dishes, I hear the shelves somewhere breathing like an animal that belongs to me and to everyone, both. If one night you find yourself wandering and the rain is telling you secrets in the language it knows, keep an eye on the brickwork between buildings that never left room for anything. If your name has been waiting on a spine, you'll feel it before you see it. And if you step inside and meet a woman with fog-white hair and a ledger and a cat who owns the floor, tell her you were expected. Tell her you remember what you wanted. Then read your book. Read long enough to love the life in the pages without resenting the life you'll return to. At the end, when the question comes, answer it the way the truth asks to be answered, without theatre, without apology. And when the dawn rehearses its first line, and the door chooses brick again, reach into your pocket, there'll be a page, you'll know what it says. And if tonight's story has eased your mind, tell us in the comments, what would your alternate life book show on page 1?